The release of F1 the movie is imminent, and we at the race were lucky enough to attend a preview screening at the Canadian Grand Prix as part of an audience including 1997 world champion Jacques Villeneuve. So what did we learn? First, fair warning, there are spoilers ahead. We're not giving away the whole plot of the film, but we are going to let slip some significant details that some of you may not want to hear before you see the movie. This really is one that's best viewed at the cinema, ideally in IMAX format, so if you're wavering, it's definitely worth the trip, because the experience will be so much better than if you watch it at home. If you want to wait to watch the rest of this video until after you've seen the movie, we understand, but now you've been warned, here are our key takeaways from a first viewing. Pitt's age isn't a problem. Brad Pitt turned 60 during production, which is pushing it even by Fernando Alonso standards. His character, Sonny Hayes, returns after being out of F1 for 30 years, which means that he would be in his early 50s at best. Yes, it's a stretch, but well within the acceptable boundaries of the suspension of disbelief required for watching any movie. Pitt is the star central to the movie being made, so that's just one of the things that must be taken as a given. How he gets the required super license points to race in F1 is an unanswered question, however. While the circumstances of his return, plucked from jobbing racing driver status to jump in mid-season, are extremely fanciful, it's covered off well enough for the movie world. What's disappointing is that, like so many of the insubstantial storylines in the movie, the clash of youth and age is only addressed in the most shallow terms. This is a persistent weakness. While the overall arc of the storyline is one of redemption, there are many narrative threads that are unsatisfyingly pulled then discarded. The limitations of the script also mean this is one of the less charismatic roles you'll see from Pitt. It's also a challenge for Damson Idris, who puts in a likeable stint as Hayes' teammate Joshua Pearce, but with a script that doesn't allow him to shine as brightly as he could. Paddock cameos aplenty. The movie is packed with brief on-screen appearances from F1 Paddock regulars, but several well-known faces make proper cameos. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur and McLaren's Zak Brown appear in an FIA press conference hosted by Tom Clarkson, alongside Apex GP team boss Kasper Malinsky, whose operation they give short shrift. "What do you think of Apex GP?" Vasseur is asked. His reply: "I don't." Good burn. Toto Wolff and Stefano Domenicali also make late appearances, the latter painfully shoehorned in, while former Haas team principal Gunther Steiner turns up on the pit wall. This is set in 2023, remember, mouthing his trademark direct language. Aston Martin owner Lawrence Stroll also appears. Despite being a producer, Lewis Hamilton surprisingly only appears on track and in a brief, wordless shot, with the rest of the drivers purely incidental. Daytona steals the show. The establishing racing scene at the Daytona 24 Hours, where Sonny Hayes drives a Porsche 911 to victory, well, in the GTD class presumably, has a touch of the classic 1971 Steve McQueen movie Le Mans about it. After the quiet character establishing shots, he heads out in the bustle of the Daytona pits and out on track. The sound editing in this scene is incredible, as Pitt jostles for position at night. You can feel every bump, putting you right in the car with him. Shot during the 2024 Daytona 24 Hours and pre-event Raw before the 24 test, it's a great start to Hayes' journey, one that some of the later racing scenes can't live up to. F1 wants this film to be a glossy advert for its product, but arguably it presents the IMSA Sports Car Championship in the best light. It's Martin Donnelly the movie. Martin Donnelly's horrific Jerez 1990 shunt, which left him strapped to his seat lying on the track, is co-opted as Hayes' story in the movie, with permission from Donnelly himself of course. Hayes was a rising star for Lotus in what is presented as 1993 when he had the shunt, an accident so large it starts at Hawthorns at Brands Hatch in the United Kingdom and finishes behind the paddock at Jerez in Spain thanks to the way it's recreated, along with the real world footage. Unlike Donnelly, Pitt returns to race at the highest level, but one of F1's most shocking accidents of the past half-century is used to good effect. More baffling is why Javier Bardem's character Ruben Cervantes, then supposedly Hayes' teammate and now the Apex GP team owner, is somehow surprised 30 years later to learn of the extent of the injury sustained in that crash in one of the more cack-handed scenes towards the end of the movie. Worst racing movie cliches avoided. Thankfully, the racing scenes avoid some of the more irritating cliches of racing movies. There's no special extra gear or extra 20% of throttle travel when you really need it here. Yes, there's some contrived jostling for position on straights and some ludicrously overblown action, but hey, this is Hollywood, so that's to be expected. New angles, different perspective. You have never seen F1 like this. Building on the camera technology used in director Joseph Kosinski's Top Gun Maverick, the onboard imagery captured is incredible. This is best showcased early in the movie when the action is clean, spectacular and visceral. The fast pivots from the forward shot to driver are particularly impressive, as are the sounds of the car on track. The disappointment is that later in the film the action becomes more confused and doesn't match up to that early impact. While the Apex GP cars are mostly stitched into real racing footage seamlessly to the point where you wonder if the cars really were on track during the races, there are occasionally problems with the scaling of the cars, leading to a grating mismatch, but those moments are in the minority. F1 has never looked better, and the achievement of the camera technology is remarkable. It's just a shame that the standard set by the early action isn't maintained. F1 collaboration isn't always good for the drama. The desire for authenticity is laudable, but there's an inescapable feeling that it did create some limitations that aren't ideal for the movie side of the endeavour. Both Kaczynski and producer Jerry Bruckheimer have been hugely respectful of F1 and determined to deliver that authenticity, but at the same time, the need to create all the drama within the fictional team rather than bringing the real-world rivals into the storyline is a clear limitation. The desire for authenticity works in some areas, but is heavy-handed in others, and it's hard to escape the feeling that great as the chance to film at F1 events was, the product serves F1's ends more than that of the movie maker and therefore the audience. And while there are attempts to ensure their strong representation in Apex GP, the two female characters working on the racing team are not well treated. This is not a movie that passes the Bechdel test, the famous measure of representation of women in films that requires two female characters to have a conversation about something other than a male character. That's a missed opportunity because Kerry Condon plays F1's first female technical director, Kate McKenna, who was given a dashed-off backstory and exists primarily to be told how to make a more competitive car by Hayes and to be a love interest. The crashes are excessive. It's a racing movie, so there are crashes, and they are big. There's a massive accident at Monza that culminates in a Roman Grosjean-style inferno, which in itself is fine. However, the moment the car catapults through the air, which has a little of Alex Peroni's F3 crash there in 2019, isn't well executed. In fact, the way the car flies has concerning echoes of Memo Moreno's infamous shunt in the 2001 Champ Car movie Farrago Driven, although it is at least far better executed. There's also a big shunt at Las Vegas that doesn't entirely hit the mark. Of course, that also means there's driver injuries aplenty, although these play rather perfunctory roles in driving the plot. Tyre strategy is the star. Tyre strategy is a big deal in F1 and it's a regular plotline in the movie. Whether that's Hayes playing by his own rules with tyre choice in the cockpit or pre-race strategy briefings, there's no lack of tyre talk, as in, a lot. It's an admirable attempt to be authentic but also likely to baffle audiences. The storytelling doesn't come easily in the movie, with show don't tell filmmaking too often put aside for commentators David Croft and Martin Brundle explaining goings on. There's a little too much explaining the plot going on in general for a medium where the visuals should do the heavy lifting. At one point, having fresh tyres available for a late red flag restart thanks to being eliminated early in qualifying is a factor. That's authentic, but perhaps a little too authentic for most moviegoers, given the need is felt to explain that it stems from qualifying failure, having never previously referenced the existence of that part of the weekend. It makes sense to those who know motorsport, but it's just one of many times when an F1 regulatory plot point has to be explained when really it doesn't need to be. Race manipulation is extreme but not unprecedented. There's quite a lot of unsporting behaviour, if not outright cheating, from the Apex team to the point where it gets a little bit Singapore 2008. There's an attempt to excuse this with the team being shabbily treated by an incompetent and easily fooled regulator, but the we make our own rules because they don't like us storyline is another underdeveloped one. You're never really convinced that the team has earned this, and it seems a lazy way to justify dubious on-track ethics. However, all of the tactics, holding up half the field, deliberately triggering safety cars, taking out opponents, have happened. Admittedly, not in the course of half a season with the same team, but such overblown antics are to be expected for what is a Hollywood movie, not a documentary. Yet while the on-track storylines go big, the off-track ones that drive the narrative of the movie are disappointingly tepid, particularly an antagonist whose nefarious objectives manifest themselves late on and the laboured Hayes-Pierce dynamic. Williams, McLaren and Mercedes play a role. F1 wasn't only shot at races, but also used some real F1 facilities. Apex GP's headquarters is the MTC in Woking, home of McLaren, while the simulator scenes are filmed at Mercedes and offer a rare glimpse at technology that is rarely showcased to outsiders. There are also scenes shot in the Williams wind tunnel, which was taken over for 4 days to facilitate filming. That showed the wind tunnel in motion, as well as some of the technology used in rare detail, worth the price of admission alone for an F1 fan. Mercedes, of course, also made the Apex GP cars, working around the baseline of F2 machines. Hardcore fans can find annoyance. Hardcore fans that make up much of our audience are expected to suspend disbelief for much of the movie, but if you really want to pick holes in what happens, there's plenty of opportunity. For example, Pitt's character's refusal to arrive at circuits other than by walking in one end or the other of the pit lane is an acceptably cinematic device. More baffling is throwing in a name like Louis Chiron to justify Pitt's character's age and erroneously claiming he won the Monaco Grand Prix in his 50s. Yes, he was 55 when he started his last Grand Prix at Monaco, but his victory there was at the age of 31. Likewise, there are sporting regulation violations aplenty, for example, substituting a driver between qualifying and the race, but there are also plenty of surprisingly accurate rules referenced, maybe too much for the average moviegoer, given the amount of time dedicated to explaining things. Is it worth seeing? Now, we haven't talked so much about the making of the movie, but if you'd like to find out more from us, and remember the race has been there on set at every one of the races where they filmed, check out our previous videos delving into it. So is F1 the movie worth watching? Absolutely. At its best, the first 20 to 25 minutes, it's a great watch, even if it does lose its way thereafter, and you really do get to see F1 as you've never seen it before, even if, visually, many of the later on-track scenes become confused and lack the clear vision and crisp execution of the early ones. My view is that it ticks more boxes for F1 than it might for moviegoers who want a well-told, immersive popcorn movie, and I do have reservations about whether the storyline, emotion and characters really work dramatically. And it's its qualities as a drama, that are more concerning than the representation of F1. You do wonder if the real-world setting and production was a limiting factor for the storytelling. However, you cannot question the technical achievements and must admire the extent of efforts made by the filmmakers to immerse themselves in F1, even if it feels like the opportunity hasn't been maximised. But it will be the cinema-going and streaming audiences who ultimately make the judgment on whether F1 the movie is a hit or a miss.